Okay, so before starting up our background process or background thread creation, right? So you guys have idea on multi-threading in Java?
Not I don't have any.
Sorry. So
I don't have any idea. I'm still like I
okay.
know a lot of things in Java, but I didn't get a
No
specific
issues.
one.
I'll so because that's what like first I'll explain multi-threading in Java. I'll give you a brief complete idea on multi-threading in Java. Then we'll go ahead because this is something which you'll have to know for how differently we can actually build threading in Java, right?
Thank you.
Then we can actually give you a background work. Okay, so how about you, Teja? So you have any idea on multi-threading? Naresh?
No, Ram, I don't have any idea about multi-threading. I know that I heard the word in Java, but I don't have an idea.
Okay, no issues on that. Yeah, so basically what happens is, right, okay, Teja seems you have got an idea on multi-threading, fine. So basically how it works is like, you know, normally in any thing, right, till now whatever you have seen in Android or we have done some programming on Java, everything, right, they are called as synchronized programming. So synchronized programming is something where each and every statement will be executed, right, in order to move to the next statement, right. So let's say you have written some 100 lines of code, right. So each and every line will be processed step by step, right. First compiler will actually run the first statement, and then second, and then fourth, and then third, fourth, and so on. Look, until it completes, let's say, fourth step, it won't move to fifth step. It is taking some milliseconds in fourth step, right? It will wait till it completes, and then it will go to fifth step, right? So everything will be in synchronized way, right? Which is step by step way, right? Sometimes what we may have to do is like we may have to actually create some programs where few things are running parallelly, right. Let's say one of the loop is running in one main thread and some other are running in different process, and we want everything to run parallelly, right. So that is what we want. So that is something which we normally call as asynchronized or async programming, right, where we have in async we'll be having parallel synchronized programs, right. So these will be running asynchronously. So this will be running in its own thread, this will be running in its own thread, and this will be running in its own thread. That is something which is called as asynchronous programming. So in order to create something called asynchronous programming, we will be using something called threads. So that is the main reason why we normally go for threading, right. So which will actually create something which is called as execution path, a separate execution path for our program to run, right. So normally whenever we write any program, right, so whenever we are writing any program in Java, right, normally even if you create or not, internally compiler will create a separate thread. So by default Java program will have something called main thread. So main thread is the one which will be created by default, right, even if you create a separate thread or not. So this is a thread which will be created in which each and every program, right, whatever you write, different methods or different classes, create different methods in it, create an object of that, right, create loops, everything will run in a synchronized way, and it will be running in one single thread which is called as a main thread. So internal to this main thread, we will be creating few child threads like thread 1 and thread 2 and so on, right. So these things will be running in this main thread as a child threads. So that is something where we will be creating simple child threads in our main thread, so that we can do multiple tasks parallelly or asynchronously, right. So let us see first, let me create a simple Java project, and let me show you how we can actually create a simple multi-threading program in Java first. Okay, so let me call it as threading in Java. right? So here let me create a simple class. Let me say this is a main class. So this is a class where the main method will be, right? So where the main method will be there. So I'm just writing a simple Java program, right? And then I'll explain you how we can actually create the same thing in Android, right? So now here this is something. Let me create a simple for loop. So here I can write something called, let's say I'm gonna create simple for loop of I is equal to 0 and I less than 10, where I want to print my I value, right? And then so if I keep this, if I run this program, right? If I run this program, normally we know what happens, right? So you can see it will actually print oh sorry, I have to print I, right? Not 1, I, right? You can see it will print 1, 2, so something. Now you can see each and everything is step by step process, right? Now it went so fast that we can't actually see how it is printing. Now here what we are going to do here is we are going to create something called wait in thread. Wait is nothing but you are actually asking your thread to wait for some time and then resume the process. So in order to create wait, you have something called thread.sleep. Let's say you have to give some milliseconds. So let's say I'm giving some 1000 milliseconds, or let's say I'm giving some 400 milliseconds, right? So it will actually start from the loop, it will print something, it will wait for so much of time, and then it will resume the for loop. Let me run this now and see what happens. This is something which, as I gave some wait, right? It has conserved that wait and it is printing the numbers actually, but you can see everything went synchronously. It came to for loop, it first took I as 0, right? It checked whether the loop is correct or not, and then it printed, right? After printing, it just waited for some time. As you increase the wait, right, it will increase for more time. So now you can see, if I run this, you can see, right? You can feel that, you know, I gave 1000 milliseconds, which is a second. Right? Now you can see for each second it is printing something. Now this is something which is a synchronized way where you printed few numbers. Right? So let us see how I can print. So now here, if I create one more for loop, right? One more for loop here. Let's say I'm going to create something out of something like this. Right? Let us say this I starts from 100 and I should be less than some 110, right? And I'm gonna print this out of I, let's say. Now this is one for loop and this is some other for loop, and I'm going to take the same wait here, let's say, right? So this is one for loop I have and second for loop. Now let us see how it works. So when I run this, right, you can see that the first for loop is working. It will print till 9, right? It will come out, it will print a line, then it will print 100 around, right? Now this is something which is called as a synchronized programming, step by step programming, right? Now you can see unless first for loop is completed, the second for loop will not be started, right? Which means it waits till this for loop is complete and then it is taking up this for loop. Now this is something called as, this is one task and this is some other task, and we are doing these two tasks, right, synchronously, which is after completion of this we are taking up this. Now let us see how we can actually achieve these two parallelly. Right, now let me create a thread now. Now in order to create a thread, here in Java, threading is nothing but creation of separate class or creation of inner classes like anonymous types. Right? First let us see how we can actually create a direct separate class, which is most of the times we'll be using. I'm talking about complete Java, guys. I didn't came back to the Android, right? We'll get back to Android again. So here let me create a thread. Let's say this is something which is class CLS some thread 1. Right, so is some other class. Now in order to make any class as a thread, right, first thing you have to do is you have to extend it with thread. Right. So if you extend it, which means I'm actually inheriting thread class to my current class. Now whenever I do this, this class will actually become a thread class, and then we'll have to create a run method, which is overridden method from the thread class. Now this run method is something which will be created in a separate execution path of a thread, right? So in this run method, let me create a separate for loop. Now whatever I have created at second, right? So here let me copy this, cut it and paste it over here. And let me print it as at thread 1 and I, right? And this main, whatever we are printing at here, let's say at or parent Okay, so we are printing something at parent here, and here in thread 1 we are printing something here, right? Okay, now this is a class. Until unless we create thread using this class, right, we can't actually start this for loop, right? Now that is something which we have to go and see next step. The next step is that we'll be creating something called, so before this loop runs, we'll have to make sure to create a thread. Now how to create a thread is, we will have to use a class called thread. Let me call it as lobjthrt is equal to new. Now you can see I can actually give something called cls thread1 directly, right? Now this is possible because cls th thread1 is my class, which is a child of thread class, which means I can create an object of child and give that object to the parent object. This is possible. And once we are done with this, then second step is to start your thread. Now with this, what happens, it will actually create a separate synchronized process of this thread, and it will actually start your this for loop. Parallelly, this will run this for loop. Let me run this and we'll show you how it actually runs. Let me clear this out, and now let me run this. See here what happens here. You can see both the parent and thread1 both are running parallel, right? So this is how you can see that your thread1, something is printing from thread1, this thread at thread1, and parallelly your parent is also printing at parent and thread1, parent, thread1, parent and all, right? Now this is called as something where you are actually doing asynchronous way of tasking, right? But you can see that even in asynchronous process, you can see in parent 0, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and so on, right? Which means, so this parent is something which is printed synchronously, but this synchronous and the second thread synchronized process are running parallelly. That's why you can see with a very minute time gap, it is actually printing the same things in console, right? So that is how the multi-threading works. You can actually expand the same multi-threading to any number of threads. Now the first way, as I said, is something by extending your thread class, and the second way of creating thread is like this. So let me create one more, let me call it as thread 2. Now second way is that you can implement something called runnable interface, right? Runnable interface is something which will actually give you the same functionality of threading, but the only difference is that here we are actually extending or inheriting a class, and here we are inheriting we are actually implementing a interface. The difference is, you can in Java, I hope you guys know, multiple inheritance is not possible when you are actually inheriting a class, but you can actually implement multiple interfaces. That is why we normally go for interfaces, right? Now it says whenever you implement any interface, it will actually force you to implement all the unimplemented methods. Now this runnable, you can see there is one method called run. Now run method is something which will be actually running your program. Now here let me create one more for loop, and let me just say this is something which starts from some 999 and it is taking some 1010, and let's say I'm gonna print this as second thread. Okay, and thread dot sleep of some 1000 milliseconds. So now in this case I have created a separate thread again, thread class, right, which implements runnable, and I'm doing some task. Right, now let's go ahead here, now which means I'll have to create a separate thread again. Right, so my main, whenever I say main class, this complete execution is one thread. In that I'm creating multiple threads. Right, now here again I can create a thread. Let me call it as chrd2 is equal to, right, so I can instantiate with something called thread2, right, the same thing. But here you can see that, your thread2 normally, right, is not a child of your thread. That is why it will actually give you error. Now in this case what you have to do is you will have to actually create a direct object of this like this, and then you will have to create a thread class. Like will be creating something called LOBJ3 thrd2 is equal to new. Now you can see while creating thread you can actually give your runnable target, which is OBJ. Now in this way, whenever you give your thread, right, you can actually give an object of your runnable, which is this thread, which is CLS thread2, is nothing but a type of runnable class, runnable interface implemented class. So here we have to create an object and then give this object to thread. Now you can say thread2.start. This will start a second object. Right? The first thread started, second thread started, and parallelly our main thread is also going on. Right? So let's run this. Let me clear this out. See what happens. You can see here all the three are running parallelly. At thread 1 parent second thread, at thread 1 parent second thread, right? You can see all the things are running parallelly, right? So that is how it normally works, right? Everything. So this is how we normally create something called multi-threading in Java, and the same concept is also used in Android. Okay. So this is something which you have just seen, like creating a separate class, right, extending it with thread or implementing it with runnable, and then creating objects and all, right? Now let me show you something where you can actually create this directly. Now let me close this. Let me create main2. Let me create a CLS main2 maybe. So here I'm going to create multiple threading directly. So here let me take try catch. So let me take two parts here. So here I have my own for loop. So where I'll just say I10 is out of, let's say, parent. Okay, so this is the parent where I'm just say thread dot sleep. So this is something in order to show you that yes, the printing is actually going on. Let me give some 2 seconds here. Right? This is my main thread. Now here I can create thread in this way too. So let me create a thread here, LOBJ3HRT. So here you can see I'm not going to use any other class, to use this. Right? I'm going to create a thread directly using something called anonymous inner class is equal to new, let me call thread, where I can create in this way. Right? So where I'm actually giving a declaration of thread directly. Now here you can see I can override my run method. So in this run method I can create for loop, right? So let's say I'm just giving same 0 to again something like let's say 20, and here I'll just say sys out of thread 1 I and thread dot sleep of some 100 milliseconds, sorry 2000 milliseconds, right? So this is something where we have created a direct thread. This is the pattern which we are going to use in Android, right? Now you can see this is same as creating a separate class, extending it with thread and writing the run method. But what we have done is, so we have already seen this pattern in our something called is there any question? Okay, sure Teja. So are you in now? Okay, same Teja will reconnect, let him reconnect. Okay, so this is how we create a thread using your anonymous inner class. And this class declaration will be there only for this thread. Now once you are done with this class inner class definition, then you will have to start the thread. Just say thread1 dot start. This will actually start your thread, right? Now here this is thread1 and this is something which is a parent. Let me run this and I'll show you how it works. Let me save this and run this. You can see here it says thread1 parent 0, thread1 again parent 1, thread1 parent 2, right? So where they are actually running parallelly, right, with the same difference of time. And if you actually give some different times, so it will actually work in different times as such, right? So this is how you can see here, yeah. So till this part parent is done, right? Parent executions are done. Now that's why it is now completely in our this thread 1, right? And it is actually completing the existing thread. This is how we can use a direct thread, right? Now the second step. Second thing, we had a runnable interface, right? Now let us see how we can actually use runnable. Now normally we know that runnable is an interface, and we all know that you cannot create an object of interface directly, right? But you can actually assign the object of interface to some other valid class. So let me call it as LOBJ3HRD2 is equal to, I'll just say new. You can see here whenever I say new, it gives anonymous inner type. When you click on this, you can see it will actually automatically override your run method. Now here what I'm going to do, I'm going to write some other for loop. Let's say, let me say start with 100 and let's say it is going till 1, maybe 130, right? And I'll just sys out of print it as third thread, that's it, right? And let's say thread dot sleep of, let's take some 1900 instead of 2000, right? Now this is my second thread. I created this thread using my runnable interface, the fourth way of creation, right? And once you are done with this, just say the thread dot start. Once you are done with your creation of runnable, runnable cannot be started directly, right? You will have to give it to thread. Let me create a thread object which is LOBJ2HRD2. So let me give it as runnable, right? And you can create a thread where you can give your runnable object, right? So once you are done with runnable object, then you can start a thread dot start. This is how we can create one more thread directly. Now you can see that I am not using I'm not creating any class. I'm actually writing the complete threading thing over here itself, right? So let us run this and we'll see that all the three threads will actually run parallelly. When I run this, right, you can see there is thread1 parent, right? You can see that all the three threads are running parallel, right? So this is how we normally work in multi-threading of Java. There is one more thing. that you can actually create something called multiple threads, where some of the threads will be background process of continuous process until you actually kill the application, right? Like let's say you want to check a Wi-Fi, you want to check the Wi-Fi on or off, right? Now whenever you just enter into Wi-Fi region, it will give you that yes, there are few Wi-Fi points available, right? So that is something where a background process is going on, right? And it will actually track a Wi-Fi locations and it will actually give you, right? The same way you can actually use the same pattern to do that, right? Now how can you actually create an infinite loop is that you can actually create a same way, and maybe you can just create an infinite while loop normally, right? So that is something where you can actually get the things. Now this is how you can create a multi-threading in Java. So now any questions here? So if you are clear with this, then we'll move on and I'll show you how to create a background process in Android. So any questions here, or you want me to just give some explain any part of this again, you can just ask me now, because this is something which is very important in creating background process and in actually accessing internet whenever you actually create a web service, right? So we will be doing that part using a background process, right? So this is something which is going to be a very important task. Now here, is this clear for all? How we can actually create a multi-threading in Java?
I guess so, because you explained 5, 8, 7, like with 5 reading 5.
I'm sorry, Nabila. What is that? I didn't get what you were saying.
I thought you explained like 5 different ways, right, to create a thread in Java, either with the class or with the interface or with the object.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of the syntax to understand the syntax and the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just just gave you an idea on different ways of creating threads. Yeah. But the working model will be same. Working model will be same across all. Now why I gave these many is to get into one definition of this. So this is something which I'm going to use actually. So if I create this thread directly, you may not understand. That's why I just created a separate class first, right? And then we created a multiple threads.
Yes, very good.
Yeah. Okay. Now is this fine? So shall we move on with creating background process in Android? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Now if you understood this right, so it will be straightforward and it will be easy to get it. Now let me create a new project of Android. Let me call it as background, maybe thread. So let me do com dot c dot this next. Next, finish. So this is my main class here. So let me create a new activity. So Android. So let me call it as threading activity. Okay, so this will be my main activity. So in this main activity, let's on create, let me map to the threading. Okay, so this will actually be, it will actually directly load into the heading activity. Now let's design this part. Okay, let me take the same text maybe, right? So let me just take it text over here. Let me take a button with respect to okay, have a button, let's say. Now let's go ahead and create this. So let me call it as txt data, and let me call it as start thread. So which is my btn start, right? So I have two things. So initially I just have something called hello world, okay, so this is going to be txt data. So let me call it as center horizontal as true. Perfect, right? So this is my this now. So when I click on start, right, so we'll do one thing, that in our background process, right, what we are going to do, we'll generate number, random number maybe, right, and then we'll print it here, right, or we'll generate some number and we'll print it here, right, click on thread. Now let's go ahead and go see how we can actually create the same. Now let's go to threading. Now here let me take a button first. We have find view by id r dot id dot, you have something called btn start, right, and I'm going to cast it to button. So once you're done with this, just say hey, I will btn start. Right, so here I'm going to implement this view. So here let me create a separate method which is start right, just say I'm just giving it as start background process, right, and then let's create a method. Now here I'm going to write the threading and all. Now here so what we have to take is, we have to take a text view. So let me take text view here. Let me call this lstr txt data, and then let's say I'm going to take some static int as I, right, and initially before starting, let's say I'm going to take text data is equal to find view by id r dot id dot, you have txt data, and then let's say I value 0, right, and I'll just cast it to this. So initially the I value is 0, and we'll see how we can actually increment them and change the data. Right, so let's get back here. Now in my start background process, the first step will be creating a thread. Now I'll create a thread directly using the anonymous class of thread. So let me create a thread. Now this thread is direct java.lang thread, guys. Here we don't have any separate thread component in Android. It will take a direct so let me take it as lobj thrt is equal to new your thread. Simple as that. Now here we'll have to write what exactly we want to do in our, now in thread the main method which we have to take is run method. So the run method is something which is going to be actually triggered to create a separate process. Now in this, what we are going to do here is, now let's say I'm going to print some numbers, right? So let's say I'm going to take for loop here for I is equal to 0 and I less than some 10, let's say, right? So this is my for loop which I have. So randomly what I'll do, I'll be showing my activity directly. I won't refresh that activity, or I don't go back and come again, but my data will be refreshed automatically, right? So that is what I'm going to do now, right? So once you have the value, then here this is a process which actually created in some other thread. Now what I have to do, I have to get the data and I have to print it on my activity. So in order to do that, you have to use one method called run on UI thread, right? So run on UI thread actually is something, right, which will give you the direct way, right? It will give you access to the main UI thread. So the main UI is nothing but the main UI part which we are actually going on, right? So now here okay, so yeah, so on run thread, right, you can see that you have something called on run thread and you have to give some runnable action, right? I'm going to give new runnable, where you can see it will directly give us an option to get the data, which is right. So here what I'm going to do is, in this run, now I'm going to show the data on text data, right? So let me take string here, which is lstr data is equal to, so I'll have to convert it to string of I, and then show it to L text data dot set text. Now this is how we are going to actually show the data, right? And you can see this for loop will go in very fast manner, right? So what we are going to do, we are going to use some sleep here, which is like thread dot sleep of some, let's say I'm going to take some 500 milliseconds, not more than that, right? Or basically maybe 1000, so that we can see the effect on 1 second. So this is something how we can actually create a background process in our right? Now here, let me save this, let me rebuild this. Seems there is some problem. What is that? Okay, so this int I, maybe I can take the same I which I am using. So this is my I. Let me remove this, right? So I can use this I directly, which is in global. That's fine, right? So here what I'm doing is I'm just showing the data randomly on my screen. So here whenever I click on button, let's say I'm going to create a toast here, make text, application context, just say I'm going to do something called started thread. This is something which we are going to normally do that, right? Started thread and application started this, and what we are going to do here is, so whenever it actually set the data, it will change the data part, right? Now let us see, and let us see how it works. you have your here. Let me click on start thread. When I click on start thread here, okay, if you can see here, we missed one thing. We created a thread, right, and we'll have to start it, right? So let's click and start. Very important. Until you start a thread, this thread will be just created. This method will not be triggered automatically, right, unless you start it. Let me rebuild it and run it again. Okay, so let me click on start thread. Now you can see, right, data is directly refreshing. Now this is something which is happening at background, right? Now that's what happens. Now here, so when the thread is completed, right? Now when the thread is completed, right, so it will normally come out of your for loop, right? So when it is coming out of for loop, which means your thread is done. Now which is like this. In this run, whenever it is coming out, let me create a toast. Or what you'll have to do is you'll have to run this again on UI. Run on UI thread, new runnable. Everything you should do it on runnable itself, right? Not directly. You can't directly take a text data and run it, because this is something which is a thread, which means this runnable is nothing but it is like a delegate, right? And delegate, I hope you guys know what is a delegate, right? It can be an event delegation, or here in this case we have something called, we are actually delegating the data from one thread to the other thread, right? So here we have a direct method called run on UI, which is an actually internal class method, right? We can directly use this to do some task. Now here what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a toast dot make text of application context, just say thread stopped. Let's say it's short dot show. Fine. So this is something which happens here. Now let me run this again and we'll see. Okay, why it is given started thread? Okay, we have to give this inside this, right? I'm sorry. You have to give the started thread inside your button click. I'm sorry, I just gave it directly on. That's fine, it doesn't matter. It is just a toast which we just gave. Let me click on start thread again. Now you can see started thread, and you have this 3, 4. Now each is taking a second actually, right? And once it is done, thread stopped. Right, now you can see we are not refreshing anything or doing any process, and this is something which is taken by direct here, right? And now let's say you want to show some time, right? Normally what do we do is we normally show some time and all that. Let me take some thing over here, right? Let me just say this is something txt time actually. We'll just see how it works. Let me just remove this. Click on time. Now here let me take txt, let me call it as time here, and let me get the, I'm just, now you can actually increase with respect to your requirement whatever you have, right? You can actually use the same model to design your background process, right? Anyways, we'll see background process how we can actually use in case of consuming a web service, so when we actually get there, right? So here what I will do here is let's say for every second I'll be getting this, right? What I'm gonna do here is that, now let's say I am going to create a separate thread again, right? I'll show you even that part. So this is something where we created a single background process, right? Now let me show you how we can actually create a multiple background process, right? So that is why we have taken a time also, right? Now this is something where we created a background process 1. Let me call it as background process 1, right? And let me create background process 2. I'll just take one more method. Let me create a background process 2, right? We are going to do the same stuff, but let me use runnable too. Let me show you how we can actually use a runnable, right? So here in my start background process 2, again I'm going to take runnable interface now. I'm sorry, you can take something called runnable interface. Let me call it as LOPJ runnable is equal to new. Now you can see it will actually give you the anonymous type of creation of object. Now once this is done, you will have to start the thread, right? Let me do that part. So if you are using runnable, then you will have to go for thread, new thread of, let me take some runnable object here, and then thread dot, sorry, your thread dot start, right? This will actually give you the second process, right? Now here in this run we are going to take up a infinite loop. Let me show you how we can actually create an infinite loop and show that. So we can take a for loop. So in this for loop, what I'll do here is I'll just consider this. So this is something which is called as a for infinite loop. Infinite loop with a sleep of a second, let's say dot sleep, or let's say I'm going to give some 1000 milliseconds, right? This is something which is an infinite loop I'll be using. And then here I'm going to take date. Let me take util date here. LOPJ date is equal to new date, and then I'm going to take up a string to actually get the current time is equal to, let me take the date here dot to string, and then let me show it on time. Set text as, right? First it will actually show this and then show. Now here this is how we create a second background process. Now here there is a mistake again. I can't set the time directly. It is a infinite loop which is running in a separate thread. So before doing anything, I'll have to do everything on run UI thread, which is, it will be taking separate runnable. This is how I have to do. Very important, guys. And let's do the stuff inside this, right? Because this infinite loop will be running on a separate thread, but as the separate thread is running parallelly, whenever I want to show something on screen, I'll be showing over here, right? So that is why I have taken runnable UI, and what I want to show here is I want to show the current time on the screen. That is what I'm going to show, and I've started the thread. Now once we have started, now the same thing we just said started, right? So let me take it to start thread process here. Means it is started. Let's say started process 1, and let me take the same toast and just say started process 2. Right? This is what happens. So my second process is something which is a continuous process, no gap at all. Right? Now let me run this. So I am actually taking up both the process, background process in one click. Right? Normally sometimes whenever your app starts, right, you may have to start some of the background. Now you can actually use this background process to show ads, right? You may have to show different ads randomly, right? You can actually pick the script and show it on using something, right? Now here let me click on start thread, and I click on start thread. You can see started process. Now you can see the time changing, right? Now this time I'm actually, you can see here there is no flickering. Now I can thread stopped. Now this thread is something which got stopped basically, right? But this is actually going on, you can see, right? I'm not using any timer object or anything. I just took some basic text view, right? And I'm showing something directly. Now as I'm actually making it sleep 1 second, right? That's why you can see that it is actually giving every second, you can see clicking on. If you give more time, right, now obviously it is going to stop. Let's say I'm going to give every 5 seconds I want to show the time, right? Now you can see you have to increase your sleep. Normally you should not give you should actually give your threads which are running on a low priority. Now normally how do you do that is you can just take it as dot set priority. You have something called set priority. Normally this is something which is very important. Now every thread will have separate priorities normally. Now if you don't give any priority, right, so the 5 will be the default priority of any thread. Normally priority starts from 1 to 10. 10 is the highest priority, which means very important thread will run on 10 priority, and the least priority threads will run on 1 priority. Now if you want to give something on least priority, you can give, let's say 2, let's say, which means this thread will run in least priority. But yes, this will be taken up in threading, but this will actually take priority of 2 as compared to other processes. That is how you can actually set your priority. And if you want to run something called, let me check whether we have something called set. Okay, it is in .NET. Anyways, you can just set it directly of priority. Normally in .NET there is something called priority of background. So let me show you something here. If you go to your task manager, right, you can see for each process, if you can see there is something called set priority, right? You have real time, low and all, right? So normally all the normal process will be running on the normal basis, but if you want to actually increase the priority of any, right, you can actually increase if you are admin, right? Now as we are creating this thread, right, so we are admins of this thread. That's why we can actually see that everything will work as we need actually, right? Now let me run this and see how it goes on. Now here you can see I'm actually giving a sleep of 5000 milliseconds, okay, which means it will wait for 5 seconds and it will actually trigger the event again. Let's see what happens. Start thread. Now you can see it is 33, 4, 5, you can see 38, right? So which means for every 5 seconds it will actually work. Right? So this is how you can actually create your background process, and whenever you are creating background process you will have to actually see how it works for multiple timings, right? Timing is something which is very important, right? So if you are actually creating some social app, you can't create a background process which is running continuously. It will kill your app, right? Because as compared to the normal machines, right, your app will be your mobile phone, right, will be obviously, each and every sensitive thing will be sensitive, right? Your process, your RAM, how much it is taking, everything will be, sensitive, which means you'll have to consider how it normally works, right? So that is what we have in background process and all. Okay, so you have any questions in this, guys? So this is something how we actually create a background process normally. Now you can actually go ahead and create your own things as you have. Now you can see that one more thing that let me just show you something. We have seen runnable, we have seen both thread, and we have seen both runnable, and yes, we also have seen something which is running parallel, right? Now if you want to increase, you can increase this. Let's say I'm gonna send it some 1000. It doesn't matter at all, right? Both will be triggered at a time, and you can see each and every second will matters. So this is something which sleeps for 1000, which is 1 second, and this is 5 seconds, right? So both will be clicking at, I think, equal rate with multiples of 5. Right, perfect. Okay, for each 5 multiples here, you can see it will change. Perfect. Yeah, 15, and we have 20, 19, 20. Perfect. Right. That's how we can actually work on background process. And yeah, so in our next step will be checking out something on web services creations and all, right? So web service creation in Java is, if we are using Eclipse, right? So this is something which will be easy, right? Now for web service, it will actually give you the complete way how you can actually use web service creation and all directly, right? So let me show you something on that. Let me close all. Let me go back to this and let me uninstall this app. Or that's right. Because sometimes what happens if your process is not, this will be eating up our actual machine process, right? Because we have shared our machine RAM process to this, right? So let me go ahead to main menu, click on this. Okay, you can see how aggressive it is going. It is not giving the whole. Let me go to menu, click on menu, manage apps. Now here you have background threading, right? Go to that and let me uninstall this process. Or rather you can stop it up, right? Okay, it will take care of this now. So whenever we are creating a web service, right? So even for that you have a new project here. I can go to new project. Now here you can see some, again, for creating your web service, right? So we'll have to go to something called dynamic web project itself. So dynamic web project type is something under web, right? You have many types. Let me show you that. So under web you will have your dynamic web, static web, and all, right? And this is something which we'll be using for creating websites or web services or standalone things and all. right? Now let me click on next. Now this, in this screen, this is something which is very important. So let me just call it as my web or something. Let me call it as store WS, which is store web service. I'm just taking an example. Right now you can see that it needs a Tomcat, right? Now Tomcat is something, until unless you have a Tomcat server, right, you can't actually go ahead with creation of web services, right? Now I hope you guys know what is a Tomcat server and all, right? Tomcat is something which is a, sorry?
I don't know. I don't know about it.
Okay, so you guys know about server technology, how server technology works? Now normally, what is a server, right? Sorry?
That's what I have a little bit idea of.
Okay, no issues. So let me explain that once. Okay, Teja, you can share what exactly maybe. Yeah, you want to? I think you can unmute yourself, Teja. If you want to share, you can share what exactly is. Okay, that's fine. So let me actually have probably. Okay, fine. No issues. No issues. So let me just give you some how the actual web technologies and everything will work, and then maybe we'll go ahead with web service creation. Okay. So here. So normally, so let me explain you something called hubs, like how the hub is created. Now, whenever I'm talking about hub, like, so it is something. Let's say here this is end user, which is, let's say, client, some client. So in his laptop, right, he is doing something. Let's say, right, he is just using his laptop, right, and he's actually working on, and he is trying to open up a page, right, which is something, let's say it's some google.com. I'm just giving an example, right? Now let's say Google server is in, let's say it's in some US location, right, and then let's say this guy is actually trying to access this from China. Now normally what happens is, so anyways, Google, let's say Google have got only one server where they have hosted servers on only one server at US location, right? Normally, let's say how the hub is created is, network is created is, now this guy, let's say person A, right, so he will be taking a network connection. Let's say they have, in this street there is one network provider, right, who is connected to one small hub. Now from this hub, let's say he just provided an internet connection to this guy, right? So this guy is from a small street in China, right? In this way, all the guys who are in small streets, they will be having their own hubs, right? And all these smaller hubs will be connected to a bigger hub, right, which is for complete China country, let's say, or let's say for complete in Shanghai, let's say there are so many streets, so everything is connected to one hub, which is, let's say this is something which is a Shanghai's hub. Now in this way, let's say there are 3 different cities, they have their own hub, and all these 3 will be connected to complete China hub once. Right? Now this is something which is China hub. Same way, let's say you have got one more hub which is some Indian hub, Same way you have some other hub. Now all these three will be connected to, let us say, Asian continent hub, bigger hub. Which means once it is connected to this big server, which means they will be, by default they will be interconnected again, because they are connecting through Asian continent. In this way, let's say it is connected to European continent and other continent hubs, main hubs. And let's say this server is something which is connected in US, one of the US hubs. Now whenever this guy actually tries to get some network address, right, which is google.com, which means that google.com domain will be registered with network people with some IP, static IP and port being locked with this server. Now immediately what happens is this will actually trigger multiple hub networks, and it will go to the actual server page and will get so it will actually choose the hub routers will be so smart that it will actually choose the nearest path to the server, and it will actually get the page and it will be showing to you. That is something how your hub network works. Sometimes across the continents, right, some networks will be through it will be beneath seawater, or it will be satellite. It can be the propagation of these things will be anywhere, but the hubs will be connected in this way, right? So which forms a complete something called web network for a complete world. This is how normally it works. Now if you take a direct example of client and server, simple. Now let's say, to be just cut short everything, let's say this guy is a client and he is a server, right? Now whenever I say server, right, I am talking about something called a physical machine, right? Physical machine like computer or supercomputer, which we can actually use as a server, right, which can actually serve multiple clients at once, right? Now whenever, let's say this is something which is a physical server, and in this physical server I have deployed my website, and this server name is google.com, right, and I've hosted my site in 80 port. Now where do we give this 80 port? And now this page, all your pages which are called as JSPs or web service, everything, right, how can this guy can access these? Anyways, you will have a hub. This is something I'm just showing all the hubs at one place here, and this hub will actually trigger your server. Now whenever it triggers, right, it can't trigger my server, my machine, which is a physical machine directly, and can't pick page and give it back to client. No, it can't do. There will be a separate medium in each and every server called web server. This is a software which is called as a web server. Now this web server is the main guy who actually accepts a request, right? With respect to request, it will actually search my folder or repository or directory for the page. Let's say he requested for login.jsp, right? Then this page will be there in one of my directories, right? It will pick it up and give it back to the client. That is something which is a web server. And one of the web servers, or there are so many web servers in market which supports thing, right? So one of the web server is Tomcat. Now that is something what I am talking about, something called Tomcat web server, which we'll be using, right? So that we can actually use Tomcat, because we will be creating a web service. Web service will be deploying over here, right? And that web service will have to expose to the outer world. Now this client can be anything, guys. So this guy, I'm talking about a laptop here, right, who is trying to browse using a browser, or it can be a mobile phone, right, where you have got an app, right, and this app guy is trying to connect to the server, right, using a visual link. Visual is nothing but a web service generating. I'll show you everything how to create an app, right? So that is how it will actually, the propagation or the medium actually works. from a server to the any client or a mobile app. But usage will be different. The implementation normally, not usage. The implementation of a page or implementation of web service is different. The way of implementation is different in website application and different in Android. Sorry, yes, Android application. Let's talk specifically about Android. Let's not go into some other mobile apps, right? Now, what we are going to learn is how we can actually do the complete setup. I'll be giving you a complete setup of web server and deployment, creation of web service, right? And I'll show you how we can actually see something called WSDL link. What is the WSDL link and all, right? And then we'll see how to implement it and on. Now, this is something which actually gives you the complete view of something how your web technologies work. Right?